Wonderful. Okay, I think we should actually start now. Just to let you know that this session will be recorded. We actually have around 100 people signed up, so that's the reason why I'm still just waiting for a few more to join in. But since this is actually recorded, it should not be a problem, and we will more than happy to share the recording with all of the registered participants. Well, thank you so much for joining us for today. So today's session, we're going to look into the research impact outlook, planning and executing for research impact. And reality is that we want to explore further on what is research impact and what does it matter and what's the outlook of research impact, particularly in Malaysia chapter. And we have three distinguished speakers for us today. Perhaps I'm not going to call them speakers, but more on a panelist, because the way we're going to run the session is more like having a dialogue and conversation and sharing our knowledge about where is this research impact heading, particularly in the Asia chapter, and what can we learn from other parts from the world, particularly from Australia. I myself could actually share a little bit about research impact in the UK, where I'm currently based. A little bit about myself before I introduce the panelists today. My name is Dr. Ainurul Rosli. I'm the Director of Business Engagement, Reader in Entrepreneurship and Enterprise at Brunel Business School. Currently, I'm also leading the Small Business Leadership Program set up by the UK government to support small businesses in England. I'm just focusing more on the chapter for Brunel, supporting West London businesses and England businesses. But I think that's very important, because in this current situation, what we want is actually to make sure that the university is actually doing something for the local community. And then that's one thing, is my own contribution, what I could do to help local businesses in the UK. So that's a little bit about me. Let me actually introduce you to the speakers, and I would actually invite the speaker to switch on your video. May not necessarily you want to switch on your mic at this point of time, but at least everybody can actually start looking at your beautiful face. So we have here today Dr. Tamika Hayden. Now, Tamika is actually the one who founded Knowledge Translation Australia in 2014 and transformed it to the Research Impact Academy 2019. So for those who have the advantage to actually join Research Impact Academy last summer, it was really fantastic. She has a background in health research and research coordination, where she was focused for more than 15 years. She's passionate about impact and making it easier for researchers. What I can say about Tamika is that her goal and purpose as the principal of the Research Impact Academy is to ensure that research is relevant and accessible to the people who need it. So she has a fantastic network across the globe that look into research impact. So we are so happy to have you today, Tamika. Thank you for joining us. And the next one is Professor Hyrule Abdul Rasheed. He's the Vice President, Research and Innovation from Multimedia University. Prof Hyrule, I would appreciate if you could actually switch on your video so that we could actually see you when you are speaking later on. So Professor Hyrule is the professor at the Faculty of Engineering, Multimedia University, Malaysia. And he's the Vice President, Research and Innovation, where he oversees research, innovation, and entrepreneurship strategic planning, management, and monitoring in the university. He has served MMU for over 22 years. So, wow, that's amazing. I've only been in Brunel for less than around 3 years, but I've been over 3 universities across since I started teaching. I can't beat Professor Hyrule there. I can't beat him. Research focus has been on specialty optical fibers for communications and sensing and measurement. So that's what we have for Professor Hyrule. We have next Professor Dr. Shaliza Binti Ibrahim. Prof Shaliza, if you could actually switch on your video as well, that would be great. And while I'm actually introducing you, So Prof Shaliza is the Professor, Institute of Ocean and Earth Science, and she is also the Deputy Vice Chancellor, focusing on Research and Innovation Office. So she has a vast experience in this area and have done a lot of research, and has been doing and support researchers on impact. If I'm not mistaken, Prof Shaliza, you are also the president of what's the NGO that you are leading it?
It's the Malaysian Association for Research Managers and Administrators.
Yes, so she is the president for that. So this is where.
By the way, I'm Associate Vice Chancellor, not Deputy Vice
Oh,
Chancellor.
sorry, Associate Vice Chancellor. Apologies for that, Prof. Shaliza. So you see, we have a interesting individuals today to understand the chapter of research impact in Malaysia, and perhaps to make us aware on its importance, on why is it matter for us researchers, hopefully, to to make sure that our research has some sort of relevance and being useful to the beneficiaries. So without further ado, I would just simply would like to ask the first question to the panelists. So we know that we've been talking a lot about research impact, and I know that even in my institution, they're very, very strong on research impact. In fact, I'm currently now writing my own research impact for my own research, and I'm also struggling despite the fact that I'm actually train people about research impact. So what is research impact from your perspective, and why does it matter? So let's get back to basic so that we can then discuss this matter. And let's try to understand this further on what is and isn't research impact. Anybody wants to go first? Perhaps Dr. Tamika, do you want to try to lead that conversation?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so it's a really big question, and I think impact is different things to different organizations, and I think that's got to be made really clear. And even in Australia, our funders have different types of impact. So I guess for me, impact is all about making sure, or impact is the result of people using research evidence. So that's essentially what it is in a nutshell. Whether that's using it external to academia or within academia is another question and a debate that you can have depending on the definition of the organisation. Perhaps it's assessing impact. So for me, it's about use, and there's a couple of key words that I say are related to impact: use, adoption, adaption of your work, implementation of your work into someone else's, and this is the key, someone else's practice or process or whatever. So it's use by someone else that I guess for me I focus on, and I think that's the easiest way for people to think about it. But in terms of what it is, I think in terms of your context, in terms of if you're writing for a grant, if you're writing for an assessment body, it's really going to come back to that definition.
Thank you, Tamika. Prof Hyrule, do you want to try to address that as well?
Okay, thank you, Ainurul. Pleased to be here meeting everyone. I think, yeah, same thing goes here when we went through with the team to understand, what really is research impact is eventually about seeing the outcome rather than output of the research activities that we carry out being put to good use. And it really does. I agree with Dr. Hayden that it really depends on the organization. For example, we here in MMU, our parent company Telecom Malaysia would view research impact as the outcome of our research being commercialized, for example, or being adopted in the company, whether it is for business processes all the way to a technology. And why it's important, I think, over time, when it comes to public grants, taxpayers are becoming more critical and wanting to see whether their taxpayers' money, hard-earned money, is being put to good use, that eventually can make their lives better. whether it is a policy, whether it is a new law, a new act, a new process, etc., etc. Because there's millions being poured, if not more, into public research funding. And I think the ministry, being politicians, they also want to highlight that, we've been managing this well. And at the end of the funnel, it's really making our economy grow. It's making our lives better. It's making the community safer, and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Great. I think there's a few keywords that we could actually address here. Usefulness, commercialized and adopted, and understanding the context. Now, Professor Shaliza, I know that you are the last for this question, but I just want to ask you, why does it matter, being a president of this research association for Malaysia, why does it matter in terms of research impact?
Yeah, I think it matters that for us to understand when we say impact, what we mean by it. I think it's fair to say that all this while, most of us have been in UM, at least we've been busy with the academic type of impact. But now we are realizing the importance of having the real impact or making the difference in the outside world. And it matters because firstly, it puts our researchers to think about what they are really doing, gives them, make them see their purpose other than just being busy doing the process of research. And then also it's important because we want to show that we have done something useful to the society, and more increasingly academics are being pressured to show real impact meaning impact to the outside world. So as Tamika mentioned, she thinks even the academic impact has to be considered. But now, in order to push us a bit more towards the real impact, we're trying to say, no, yeah, we know that we can already achieve publications and that, but what about impacting the real world, making a difference in the real world? And that can come in many ways. That it can be just even if you create awareness or understanding, or or of course if you have help the economy or societal changes and things like that. So there are a range of how you can impact the outside world beyond academia. Yeah.
So as you can see that three of our panelists has agreed that it is actually important, and the definition is a bit varied as well, but all of you are actually agreed that it is actually about usefulness and adoption. I know I'm going to address this to you again, Prof Shaliza. I think before I do that, I just want to say thank you to Social Innovation Movement and NGO that actually hosting this session. They are actually in the mission of, addressing research impact in Malaysia, particularly. And I'm actually also the president of the NGO. Now, what is the current state and outlook of research impact in Malaysia, Prof Shaliza? Are we ready for this? I understand that, you've mentioned that, it is very important. Research is about making sure that we could actually take our researchers beyond the publication. But the thing is, are these researchers ready for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. One is personally, I feel, can I just share what I can see, what I can observe is happening in terms of the pattern, in terms of our funders especially, because we deal more closely with the Ministry of Higher Education and the Ministry of Science, Innovation, Technology and Innovation, where we get fundings from these ministries. And more what we're seeing is that our funders are requiring our researchers to show their partnership or collaboration with an external stakeholder, particularly industry, before at the onset of writing the proposal. So when we submit the proposal, we must already show a kind of what they call letter of intent or an expression of interest from the proposed partner, which means we are already making our researchers engage with the stakeholders at the point of writing the proposal. And this is a very good start, I think, to educate or to get into that culture or practice of making impact. Because once we engage with the stakeholders, we then ask questions which might help to solve problems or issues or challenges from the world outside. And therefore our research that we propose will be geared towards that. So I think now, whether you like it or not, if you're asking for grants from our ministry funders, I think almost all the grants except for the two more fundamental ones, we are required to show that partnership. And even with the ones that are for fundamental research, we are encouraged to show, and we get bonus marks if we show that we have made that effort. So I think that's a good start, and to train our researchers to go out and open their mind in terms of doing research that will be relevant to the world beyond academia. And also what I find is that our ministry, especially Ministry of Higher Education, is eagerly populating and expanding their database. So they're coming back to us, asking us what has happened to this research that happened several years ago, and they had already concluded those research, but we now have to show them if there were papers published, if there has been any engagement or anything that followed up from those research. So to show that, you know, there has been interest from industry or other external parties, so that I think they are beginning to make us aware how important it is for us to have this continuing activities after we finish the research. So I think these are positive progress or changes that are happening, which I think will indirectly or directly equip or prepare our researchers to move towards being more impactful.
Thank you. I think that's very promising to hear that, and I believe that you know, it is actually hope as well. I think that my team in Social Innovation Movement to be part of the journey there as well. But one thing is that I just want to understand as well, Professor Hyrule here, what are you currently doing in MMU in terms of supporting researchers for research impact?
Okay, thank you, Ainur. Okay, what we've been doing in MMU is we've done a series of workshops. One is to create awareness among the staff so that they understand better what is research impact and how to work towards research impact. Secondly, what we've also done is we feel that some of the expected impact that one would like to achieve is typically complex, and it's not as easy as, you know, having a single project and see a real change and something being adopted. And because of that, we feel that multidisciplinary research is the way to go. And we've started forming research programs ranging from cyberbullying to food security, for example. So under each of these research programs, we've put in together researchers coming from engineering, from law, and all the way to social science. So I think, for example, the issue of cyberbullying, we've put together people who are now working hard with the ministry, in this case, the Ministry of Communications and Multimedia, to study the possibility of having a legislation towards preventing cyberbullying from happening. On the sidelines, we see that there are many opportunities to explore, for example, awareness. So we can have researchers who are into communications, into visual communications, and understanding effective communication in getting the right understanding and awareness among the public, especially on what is cyberbullying and why it is dangerous, and you know, we must fight cyberbullying and what are the impacts if this is not being addressed. So yeah, these are some of the examples you know, that we try to do in the university. But I must say we are really, you know, in the early part of the journey, which is typically the hardest. But I think, you know, a journey of 1,000 miles always have to start with that one single step. So it's better late than never. We're still, you know, it's still ongoing. Yeah, thank you.
So Tamika here, I know you've been doing research impact across the world. Even in the UK, while my institution are still struggling to get all of our researchers to embed in research impact. And from your thoughts, Tamika, is there any tips that any things that you want to share with us, given that based on what Professor Hyrule and Professor Shaliza have mentioned, that Malaysia is gaining, researchers in Malaysia are starting to gear towards research impact?
Yeah, I think it's great. Like, I was really pleased to hear what Shaliza had to say about how it's being built in. And I think one of the things that you said right at the beginning that really piqued my interest was, are we ready for that? And what I would say is yes and no, anywhere in the world. The UK obviously has kind of moved ahead. But in Australia even, and obviously for your example, yes and no. So the reason I say yes is because I'm yet to meet a researcher who doesn't want to do research or doesn't want to do work that isn't valuable in some way. And it doesn't have to be economically valuable, but isn't meaningful. They all want to do something that's meaningful. So for that purpose, yes, we're ready because we all want to do something meaningful. The no is because what we notice is that we haven't been collecting the right information and we haven't been trained to do impact, and our reward systems aren't there yet either. So we're not often funded to do impact activities. We're definitely not rewarded in terms of internally in universities. That's still growing. And so while we're still rewarded for journal publications and peer review publications, that's going to be the focus. So that's why I would say no. What we've seen in Australia, and this is like really flipped things really quickly, within about 18 months, everything flipped because one of our funders introduced impact case studies as part of a researcher's track record in the grant applications. And that really flipped it. So our health and medical sector, they're all now going, oh my gosh, I've got to learn about this impact thing and I want to know about it and I need to write about it. So we've got a lot of interest. We have a national assessment. Our national assessment is very small compared to the UK. And our national assessment just didn't drive culture the same way that the grants did because there's no return. It doesn't mean anything to a researcher. They're not going to get anything out of writing a case study. Whereas if they can do it really well for a grant application, they're going to get funded. So there's got to be a reward. So I think they want to do it, but there's got to be the reward mechanisms put in place to make sure that people do it, I guess.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Even that, in my institution in the UK, even though there's a mechanism to support us to write research impact and to engage in research impact, not many actually work into it purely because it is actually not part of the KPI system. So basically, we are still being judged by the output that we put out there. So it is, I understand that even in the UK, we've been running research impact for how many years already, but trying to engage academics is a bit challenging because they've been trained during their PhD that it is not part of what they don't know what to do. So what we did was that in the UK was a lot of engagement with our ECR, early career researchers, PhD holders, where not PhD holder, PhD students, where we actually start to engage with them about making some sense of what is impact and how does their research, as a PhD students, they actually have to work 3 or 4 years of their life. And then if they just started to think about meaningful work, or they started to think about what can I do to make my life better, for example, other people's better, for example, they started to look at their research project differently. And I have to say some of the researchers even slightly change their topic just to make sure that whatever they wanted to do can actually create some impact. So I think the things that all of you have shared here is very important. And I know that there's a lot of researchers are here to really understand how can they do it, like Tamika said just now. If everybody, researchers want to do a meaningful research, but what is meaningful research and how can they do it? What is the first thing that they can do as a first step towards research impact? Any 3 of you that you want to start first?
I must say, what I'm going to say is what I learned from you, Ainurul, honestly. I think it was one of those trainings I attended, did together with a few others here. I think Dr. Wong was there. I think it starts with passion. I think passion will go a long way. It's that soul searching that the researcher asks oneself, what is it that they would like to see happening in society? Something's close to their heart. Like the example I gave about cyberbullying, the researcher was very moved by the fact that there was, teenagers, committing suicide because of cyberbullying, and that really, really put that question, and she told herself, she has to do something. So she said, I'm going to help country bill, or draft a parliamentary bill that would eventually put in place some form of provision so that cyberbullying can be addressed. So I think passion will go a long way. I'm sure everyone, each and every one of the researchers here, elsewhere, anywhere in any university, always have something close to their heart, from education to the environment, to health issues. I think COVID-19 is really a big one that, I'm sure everyone's very concerned with. So starting from that passion, one can look for people who have similar interests. And I think that's how we form the research program. We said, here's a research program on precision farming to address food security issues. And so people came together. There were, engineers, there was mechanical engineers, there were those who were into data analytics, those who were into IoT. So they came together and they just sat down, have coffee, and see, what can we do to see things happening and in a better way for the country. So I think that could be some of, my contribution to how one can get started. Start with, what's close to their heart, passion, and then move, work backwards and see, what needs to be done next. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm so pleased that you found us, the Social Innovation Movement Research Impact Training, useful. Thank you for that.
Definitely.
What about Prof Shaliza? What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I really like what Prof Hyrule just said, and I echo that as well. And I think once everyone, as Tamika said, has the intention to do something good, and we need to just find maybe our niche or where we can contribute. And I think one of the skills that we need to also have is to ask the right questions, because sometimes for any problem you can approach it in different ways, and sometimes with your expertise you can answer certain questions. I think posing the right question also is useful to get us motivated to search for the answer. And I think getting the right partners, both in terms of having interdisciplinary research where we work with people from other disciplines, as well as those from different sectors of the industry. Like we are from education, we can work with people from other industries so that we get better perspective of the problem or the challenge that we're looking at. And I think that will motivate us to do the research even better. Yeah.
Good. What about you, Tamika?
Yeah, I agree completely with the other two panelists. I think it's really about taking an external perspective. So I think the easiest way to start to create opportunities for impact is to think outside of academia and to bring in those partners. And so, as Shaliza said, with the questions, what you want to do is, how do you come up with the right question? You don't think about it for yourself in a room on your own. You talk to the people around you, and you talk to the people who ultimately will benefit from whichever question you're thinking of asking, to find out if you're asking the right question. Is it something that's wanted by the user? Is it something that's needed? So I guess I would say relevancy and thinking through context outside of the university and learning from those partners that you have on board would be really key. The next thing I would say is become social. Learn how to build relationships. There was some research done that was really interesting around the likelihood of someone using your research evidence. And what they found is that the likelihood of someone using your research evidence is based more on the strength of your relationship with that person than it is on the strength of the evidence you're giving them. Now, that's a little scary because it means we can give bad evidence and have a really good working relationship and people will use it. But ultimately, what we want to do is we want to give really strong evidence, but we need to build connections and we need to build trust. And that only comes from that engagement. And make sure to think of the engagement as two-way. It's not just about pushing information on people. It's about listening to what people need.
Fantastic sharing there. And I think this is not a promotion, but I think what you mentioned here is strike me quite a lot in terms of my paper that just been published last Friday on the practice of a framework of balancing rigor and relevance in scholarship. So in a way, and I think I echoed what Tamika have said here, it is very important for us to start to think about we rather than what I can do as a researcher. What do I want to do? And I think in the, I'm going to share, I totally forgotten about that paper until Tamika said about being social and started to think about our stakeholders. I'm not going to talk about that paper, but I will actually share in the link for those who are interested to download it. It is still free for the next 30 days because we just published it. But I think I echoed, this is when we start thinking about what other partners wanted to do, we started to shape the questions that we wanted to ask differently, which then lead to what Professor Shaliza mentioned as well, asking the right question. Because I've been asked quite a lot, right? Yes, I've been social, I network with people, but this is my question. But how can I know the question that I ask is the correct question? So I know these are the questions that I didn't actually share with all the panelists, but I just want to see, because all of you are researchers, right? Now, how do we know for those researchers out there who are trying to make some sense of where is the next that they should actually go with their research? How do we know that our question is the right question for that can lead for research impact? What I mean.
I guess it's a really sticky question, but I love it. So look, I guess the way I would answer this question is the way that I work with researchers is to say, when you're coming up with a project, before you even come up with the question, perhaps, what is the vision of the project? What is it that you see eventuating at the end of 4 or 5 years, should you be successful? And that drives both the passion that's come up that was spoken about. It also drives direction. Then when you meet with a stakeholder or you're meeting with people who you think perhaps have some relevancy to the work that you do or the type of work that you do, and you share your vision, you'll understand whether or not that vision for your project and what you see happening is something they share or are interested in. And then you work backwards. What are the relevant aims to get us to where we want to be? Because now we've aligned and we know that everyone that we're working with, we all have the same vision for the future. We want to get to this point at the end of 5 years, 4 years, whatever it might be in terms of a project. And I would say work that way, because often we see researchers will go into a stakeholder meeting and they'll say, thanks for meeting with me. I've got this idea. We're doing research on this and we'd love for you to come on board. Well, that's not engaging. We're telling you what we're doing and we want you to agree with us. And so what we need to do is to instead say, we have this vision that if we do some work in this area, we can really impact on this. How do you feel about that? Is that something that would be relevant to you? What questions might we need to ask in order to get there? Or what's important? What would we need to deliver? Then you know what you need to do to find what you need to deliver. That's kind of how I would start.
Thank you, Tamika. That is actually useful. I think what you've mentioned is actually quite echoed with what Professor Hyrule mentioned on this interdisciplinary, right? I think one way is about talking to people. Now, Prof Hyrule, what can you actually say on this interdisciplinary, and how can we actually know that this is actually the right question for research impact?
I'm not sure. Okay, I think one that I can share with you is in our engagement with stakeholders. I think first step before that is to first of all identify the right stakeholders. So once we identify the right stakeholders, I think in the engagement with the stakeholders, one of the clues that we get as far as direction and the vision of these stakeholders have is some of publicly available documents, such as their strategic plan, maybe a vision of the company, sort of an indication of where is it that they would like to go. I guess in the case for say a ministry, they will typically have a 5-year plan of what is it that the ministry has in mind in achieving, in improving, in closing the gap, etc., etc. So that typically gives us a clue as to what would be the right question to ask when engaging such stakeholders. We know there are issues of unemployment, especially in facing COVID-19, for example. There's issues of food security. There's issue about growing the economy. I mean, these are all indicators that we feel is quite important in leading what would be the right question to really understand, the needs and the gap that the stakeholders would like to narrow. And then that would eventually, just as what Tamika was saying, lead to the next set of activities and ideas that can. So it's all about engagement, understanding their needs before shoving it down their throats. What your idea is all about. Yeah. Thank you.
That's good. That's quite good. That's exactly what is the practice of we is all about. So, Prof Shaliza, what's your thoughts on this?
I was just thinking, perhaps you should work also with people who do foresight to see what's coming in the future.
Yeah.
And I think about the interdisciplinary research, the usefulness of working, for example, I'm a scientist, and people in the science, they tend to do what based on what they read and understand about certain principle or technology. But it's useful to work with the say people from the business or accounting, where they are very skilled at doing questionnaire surveys and things like that, to get an overview of what's happening out there, what is the future like, and things like that. I don't know, if we have time, perhaps we can do something like that, like a preliminary study to see whether how are things going, and before we formulate our own proposal, if we have that kind of privilege. Yeah.
Good, fantastic. Because I think what I can hear from all of our panelists is that engagement with stakeholders matters, and when we actually go to them and ask them to be part of our research, it is not about us, but it's about how we envisage the vision together, right? And I think what I want to share here, because my research on this area is something that I've shared with you on the chat function, that if any of you who wanted to see as well, there's a framework at the end where I actually post lots of questions, reflective questions that equals what all of the panelists mentioned, especially what Tamika has said in terms of when you go into the to the funders or partners. It's not about, hey, this is my idea, right? It's about, okay, well, this is the vision that we wanted to do. Would you want to be part of it? One thing that I just want to, before we move on to our last question, and then we open for question and answer here, is there any advice for researchers to plan and execute their research impact, right? So I have put in my work that I shared in the chat function there, that some of a practice that I can do that I could actually share as well, where to reflect on the questions that they put there. But that is actually one step. So we have a question down. Now we know our question. How are we going to plan and execute those research impact?
Can I answer that for?
Yes, you can.
For you, we have what we call the interdisciplinary, impact-oriented interdisciplinary research grant, where we make researchers identify what they want to do, but also identify stakeholders and then pathway to impact, meaning what are the activities they need to do to arrive at the impact that they have targeted to have. And then there's going to be checkpoints where we see how far they've gone and in terms of achieving those different milestones. So in a way that also puts them on track towards achieving the impact that was planned from the beginning. Yeah.
Oh, that's quite useful. What about Prof Hyrule? What about MMU?
as I mentioned earlier, I think MMU, we're still at the beginning stage where we are at the moment creating a lot of awareness about what is research impact. What we are planning next is to provide sort of a pathway. What are the possible? It's like almost like a template, almost. What are the checklists, checkpoints, things that one needs to do before they can arrive at the intended impact. It's very, I would say, atypical with, at least how I was trained during my PhD days. It's very typical to drive towards publishing a paper, perhaps maybe even file a patent, but never to realize that there is a larger impact that one needs to achieve. So that's what we're planning to do here in MMU, besides the interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary research angle.
Thank you. So Tamika, what can you share for researchers who wants to plan and execute their research impact?
Yeah, absolutely. I think definitely the pathways to impact is something that comes to mind. And in fact, in Canada, they started off with what's called knowledge translation, which is actually a pathway to impact. And they've been doing it since the year 2000. So there's a lot of resources, a lot of planning templates, a lot of tools. You just got to use the right terminology when we search the internet for these things.
That's correct.
So those plans, they ask you who you're going to work with, who you're going to share your knowledge with at the end, what the key messages you're looking to have from that work, the way that you're going to deliver that. So what are the outputs? And it's all about including things around how you will tailor that particular deliverable. So obviously we're going to publish a journal article, but are we going to do a video, a training, an exhibition? Are we going to do an infographic, a public seminar? It depends on your discipline, of course. But it starts the thinking about that at the beginning, and you have the conversation with the stakeholder. What's relevant for them? Like, there's no point giving them, a video training series if they don't really want that, or an infographic if they don't want that. So it's really about speaking through options with the potential users of that work so that they can use it. Reports are probably one of the worst ways we can deliver information. But I guess the other thing I would just want to say quickly is just to be really wary of impact pathways, because we're looking for the perfect pathway, and we're going, there must be something in the literature that's perfect. And I have this question all the time. And what I'll say is, from the UK and from the REF, they learnt they had a lot of data collected, and they were able to learn a lot from that. And out of 6,679 impact case studies from the 2014 REF, they looked at how many different impact pathways there were, and they found 3,709 different pathways to impact. So what I would say is, find a good template, plan all the steps, monitor along the way, absolutely. Be willing to pivot a little bit as well, or change and mold and adapt. But you're not going to be able to find the pathway in a publication. You're not going to be able to talk to the person in the office next door to find what your pathway should be, because we're dealing with people, human beings, behaviours, different bureaucracies in organisations, different decision-making processes. So it's all about people. So it does come back to that social interaction and engagement piece for sure.
Fantastic. So I think the key messages that I can get from all of the panelists here is all about engagement with our stakeholders. And I think what I want to make clear is that for the researchers out there, when we talk about engagement with stakeholders, it doesn't mean that we just simply have like a letter of interest and put it in our research funding application. It is more than that, like what Tamika have mentioned, having a conversation up front, sharing our vision with them to see about what else that they could actually add value to the project. And also, I think what a lot of people are missing here is having a conversation about what do they actually need and how much along the way that they could actually contribute to make our impact bigger. Because I think this is a conversation that I must have had with the stakeholders in my project to be clear on the is there any other way that I could actually add value to their work? Or is there any other way that I could actually add value to any other partners that they have? So I think one thing is about, use your network. You have a lot of network, a friend, ask those people, is there anything that you could actually help me to make, to make my work better? Is there anything that I can do for you to make your work better? And I think this is what the concept of we that I was referring to, that actually we won't be able to do our research alone. Right, and I think all of us actually need each other, and we need, expertise like what Tamika is currently doing as well. Research translation, research impact, and we also need researchers to realize that as well. And also, of course, in Malaysia now, SIM is actually starting to actually advocate this research impact in the arena, and I hope that they are able to do that successfully. Now, I think we have a few questions here before we end the session. This from Yuvarani Nair. How do we measure impact? Wow, I think SIM have informed me that they actually plan to do another session that focusing on evaluation and measurement. But I would try to ask maybe one of the speakers to actually mention what is actually, how do we actually measure impact, all right? Is it necessary for research to be commercialized in order to be considered as a research with impact? How about fundamental research, like understanding pathways linked to cancer and a rare disease there? And I think what Yuvarani mentioned there is great, because you mentioned the word pathways. And I think understanding pathway that you are leading towards it, like what Prof Hyrule said, is better late than never. The fact that we have the vision there is actually what we could actually share with our stakeholders. Now, Tamika, would you be able to answer the question there? How do we actually measure impact, and is it necessary for research impact to be commercialized to be considered as research with impact?
Okay. Firstly, it's not necessary for it to be commercialized for it to be considered impact. We have social impact. We have other sorts of impact. It's really about use. Go back to use. So sometimes it might be that a company uses your information and commercializes it. Yes. But sometimes it might be more around policy. A policymaker uses your evidence in a policy. That's an impact. It might be that a hospital uses your new way of triaging patients. That is an impact. And it gets written into their processes and protocols and whatnot. Now, how we measure impact, the very first thing I say, because people say to me, what's my impact? And my very first question is, what did you want it to be? You have to plan for impact, because otherwise you don't know what to measure. So if you want to measure impact, you need to think about what's the change that I expect to happen after my evidence from my research is used. And then you need to think about what the baseline is, so you know what the change is. That would be the key kind of rough way to put it. In terms of your fundamental research, absolutely. Now, maybe not in some places, but in Australia, we have knowledge impacts as a category. And this is very much around basic and fundamental science. And it's not just a journal article, although that's one form of impact, is a citation from a journal article, traditional impact. But if you have, for instance, and I'm just going to think about what you've said here. But for instance, I worked with a researcher who was a biologist who worked with dendritic cells, and they came up with a new way of defining dendritic cells. Now, I do not know any of this science stuff. I just worked with them on their pathway. But out of that research, they then published this new way of defining dendritic cells. They then saw that their work was cited across all these areas, but really interestingly, they saw that cancer researchers started citing their new definition. So they followed what I call the breadcrumbs. And what they found when they followed those breadcrumbs was that the cancer researchers were able to now do new forms of research because of the new definition. So it changed the way that, so they could say it was used in a new discipline in cancer to do this new research. What was really cool is when they followed what happened with the research because of the new definition, it turned out they were then able to create new forms of treatment in cancer. And because of that, this person who was a biologist in their lab could say, my work was used by cancer researchers to do this, and subsequently that has created new treatments in this realm. So that's a great way to do the pathway for a fundamental science. The other thing, just to quickly say for fundamental, because I know people find this really hard, but if you develop a new protocol or methodology, if you have a new statistical procedure, or if you publish your data set, all of those things can be followed and used by others. So anything that's really tangible that people can take and use as opposed to just a publication can be a great way to do that.
Thank you, Tamika. Prof Hyrule and Prof Shaliza, do you have anything to share on that? Otherwise, I also wanted to share something here because I think I echoed what Tamika mentioned there. And I think one thing that we need to be mindful about is that there's different type of impact that we could actually achieve. And I think majority of people, when we think about our pathway to impact, we only think about the beneficiaries. But the fact is, we need to open up beyond our beneficiaries and start to think about who else and our stakeholders that can be involved in our journey. Like, for example, you mentioned, Tamika, you're doing cancer research, cancer research, but the organization, the intermediaries, the middle person that could actually take up our understanding of how we do our research, for example, and then use it up for awareness, right? And one thing that we could actually say is that apart from whether the research is being useful or being used by the stakeholders, it could be about uptake. It could be about awareness as well. Before, people don't really know about the importance of eating healthy, for example. Then with the research that we've done, now they know that it is very important for us to eat healthy in order for us to escape cancer, for example. We never know, right? So I think when Tamika said there's a 3,000 pathway to impact there, we just have to be creative and just think outside the box. How can we do things differently? Is there anybody? When I started to do my research case study, I realized that I do business support for entrepreneurs, for small businesses, and these are the businesses are not the direct, even though they are the beneficiaries, but they are not the impact that I would be able to capture. Although I can, but actually the council, for example, who are actually supporting these businesses, who else? The intermediary, the NGO, who's actually using my way of learning, my way of teaching in their way of working. So I think it's taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture of what else that we could actually do with our research beyond that. And, doing a cancer research and then suddenly you do an awareness online, that could actually be a good, calculation on a level of awareness of your work as well. Now, anything that you want to add, any questions that you want to ask the panelists, feel free to put it in the chat function there. Any of the panelists want to add anything else? We have 5 more minutes there before we end the session. This has been very interesting conversation we have here.
I just wanted to say how that example of leading the way to cancer research just gave me the goosebumps. It's really, I'm sure the researchers are very happy to see and learn that whatever they did led to cancer treatment. Yeah. I just wanted to add earlier about what Tamika was saying, about using network and just exploring. Sometimes you can't really tell what's going to happen, because you're dealing with humans. And I think my take on that would be to cast your net as wide as possible. It's almost random. You can plan, definitely, but there's no way of making sure that it's going to turn out the way that you really want it to turn out. You can't really tell who's your next partner going to be, how big of a network they will bring in, who they will eventually lead you to meet, and what is the eventual outcome of those connections. It's almost random, honestly, but doesn't mean to say that you should not plan. Of course, you have to plan. Yeah, but casting one's net as wide as possible is good. Ainur is an old friend, and it never crossed my mind it would lead to what we're having today. Thank you.
Yes, that's indeed true, Prof Hyrule. Prof Shaliza, do you want to add anything else? Are you there, Prof Shaliza?
I think your mic, Prof.
Sorry, I was on mute. I just wanted to say it's important that Tamika said that we need to know ourselves as researchers. What is it that we wanted to achieve in terms of impact? Because sometimes, and to know what the situation was at the time, the baseline, and what difference we have made, the changes that have happened. Because sometimes along the way, when it's actually only a pathway to reaching the impact, we think it's already impact. So sometimes we get, especially when still learning about, impact. So I think it is important for the researchers to realize what is it that they want to change or make the difference in, and so that we can measure it properly.
Yeah, that's exactly. Thank you, Shalisa, for mentioning. The only way for you to be able to measure it is when you understand what to measure, right? And hopefully, maybe, hopefully in the next webinar, we could try to actually address that. What is it that we need to do in order for us to identify what to measure? Okay, so before we end the session, thank you so much for everybody for your time. Thank you so much for Social Innovation Movement for doing this webinar. But before we end, I just want to ask all of you to provide one sentence or one word that you want everybody to take away from this session. Who wants to go first?
I know. Okay. Impact is measured at the level of the user.
Fantastic. Impact is measured at the level of the user. I like that.
A vision to see change.
Vision to see change. Good one as well. So Shaliza, sorry that you are the last one.
Best.
We
Save the best for last.
Yeah, we saved the best for the last.
Yeah. Well, have impact in mind when you do your research. Yeah.
Yes, have impact in mind. That's a good one as well. So I think with this, I would like to thank everybody for your time to attend this session. And I would like to thank the panelists to be here with us and share your insights and knowledge, and to transfer and share the knowledge with everybody in the audience. And from my case as well, for me, I think one thing that I just want to make sure that you take away is actually maybe my paper. I'm not promoting it, but I think the practice of that I really want to advocate this. I think people, my colleague kept on asking me, why am I doing what I'm doing at this point of time? They don't really understand that I don't really look into publication that much. I do publish, but I think I look beyond that. And I think what I'm trying to share in that paper is a series of reflective questions to help you to take the next step in terms of planning your work. So it will not lead to research impact yet, but hopefully it will then take you to the next journey of your setting the new vision that you wanted to do, having that impact in your mind. And also what Tamika mentioned just now is actually impact is at the hand of the user, right? So it helps you to think about the user at hand. So with this, I just want to say thank you so much, and may you have a productive week ahead. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you, speakers.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Tamika.
It's a pleasure meeting everyone.
Yeah, nice to meet you, Hyrule. Have a great week.
You too. And stay safe.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Thanks all panelists. Bye.
Bye.